Famous singer forced Janitor to sing solo to mock him. However, he hit notes she never could. The auditorium was already humming before the lights came up. The kind of charged silence that lives only where people expect greatness. And when the spotlight finally spilled across the stage, it found her exactly where she believed she belonged, centered, radiant, adored before she even opened her mouth. She had built her fame on moments like this, on the certainty that when she sang, the world leaned in. And tonight was no different. The crowd rose in waves, applause rolling forward like a tide as she smiled. A practiced smile that knew the power it carried. She teased them first, always did, trading a few playful lines, warming the air with confidence. Then her gaze drifted past the front rows, past the glowing phones and the familiar faces, to the far edge of the stage where a man in a dark janitor's uniform stood still. MOP leaned against the wall beside him, yellow gloves folded in his hands as if he had forgotten to take them off. He wasn't meant to be noticed. People like him rarely were. But something about the way he watched, quiet, attentive, not dazzled, caught her interest in a way that felt like a challenge. She paused mid-sentence, eyes narrowing just a touch, and pointed toward him, laughter rippling through the crowd as she asked who he was. The man looked around, confused at first, then realized the attention was on him. Someone shouted that he cleaned the building. Another laughed, and she laughed too, though there was an edge to it, a glint of amusement sharpened by power. She invited him closer, her tone light, playful. But underneath it sat a need to remind everyone, perhaps even herself, of the distance between the stage and the floor below it. As he walked forward, the crowd murmured, amused by the spectacle unfolding, expecting embarrassment, expecting failure. He moved without hurry, steps measured, shoulders straight, as though he were simply crossing a room, instead of approaching a spotlight that could burn. When he reached her, she tilted her head, studying him like a curiosity, and asked if he could sing. The question wasn't cruel on its surface, but the way it was asked made its intent clear, and the laughter that followed confirmed it. She offered him the microphone, not with generosity, but with a grin that suggested she already knew the outcome. The man hesitated, eyes dropping briefly to the mic, then lifting again, calm and steady. He shook his head once, softly, as if declining would be the kinder choice for both of them. But the crowd began to chant, encouraged by her raised hand and mock encouragement. The pressure built quickly, applause turning into a demand. And finally, he reached out and took the microphone, his fingers careful, respectful, as though holding something fragile. For a moment, he said nothing, and the silence stretched, uncomfortable now, thick with expectation. She leaned back slightly, arms folding, confidence settling into her posture, prepared to reclaim the moment as soon as he stumbled. The band waited, unsure, glancing between them. He closed his eyes, not dramatically, just enough to shut out the noise. And when he inhaled, it was deep, controlled, the kind of breath someone takes who understands what comes next. Still, no one expected what happened when he finally sang. The first note slipped out quietly, almost unnoticed, but it carried a texture that made a few heads tilt. It wasn't loud, it wasn't showy, but it was clean, centered, resonant in a way that felt effortless. A second note followed, then a phrase, and the room shifted. Laughter dying mid-breath as people realized they were hearing something real. He sang without strain, voice warm and grounded, rising naturally as if following a path it had always known. The band hesitated, then one of the musicians softly joined him, sensing the shape of what was forming, and another followed. The sound grew, not because he pushed it, but because it expanded on its own, filling the space with a richness that pressed against the walls. The singer on stage straightened, her smile fading, eyes sharpening with disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. He moved through the melody with precision and feeling, hitting notes that sat high and pure, notes that demanded control rather than force. And when he climbed higher still, his voice didn't crack or thin, it opened. A murmur swept through the crowd, applause breaking out in scattered bursts before being swallowed by stunned silence again. He sang as if the room belonged to him now, not claiming it, not showing off, simply existing fully within the music. When he reached the end of the phrase, he didn't hold the final note for drama. He let it go gently, trusting it had already done its work. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause had been. And for the first time that night, the famous singer didn't know what to say. She stood there, microphone lowered, watching a man who was supposed to be a joke stand calmly in the afterglow of something extraordinary. The crowd erupted then, louder than before. Not the polite applause reserved for stars, but the raw, surprised roar people give when they feel they've witnessed something rare. He handed the microphone back without ceremony, nodding once as if thanking her for the chance, and stepped back, returning toward the edge of the stage where he had come from. She watched him go, a tightness forming behind her eyes, the realization settling in that some voices are not made by spotlights or fame, and that tonight, under the same lights she had always commanded, someone else had sung a truth she could not ignore. The applause that followed him off the stage didn't feel like celebration anymore. It felt like recognition arriving late. The famous singer stood frozen for a few seconds, the spotlight still warm on her skin. But the moment no longer belonged to her alone. She finished the show with professional grace, her voice strong, her posture flawless, yet inside her, something had shifted. The crowd cheered, but their energy was different now, layered with surprise and awe that hadn't been planned or rehearsed. Backstage, the noise faded into a dull echo as she walked the familiar corridors. Makeup lights glaring too bright. Congratulations sounding distant. Meanwhile, the janitor returned to his routine as if nothing extraordinary had happened, pushing his cart down the hallway, the smell of disinfectant grounding him in reality. His hands were steady, his breathing calm. But inside him, a quiet storm settled into peace. He hadn't sung to prove anything. He had sung because, for once, he was asked to be seen. As he worked, fragments of the melody replayed in his mind, not with pride, but with a sense of completion, like finishing a sentence he had started years ago and never been allowed to end. Later that night, the singer found herself wandering near the service area, drawn by a restlessness she didn't understand. She saw him there, sweeping near the exit, the same uniform, the same unassuming presence. And for the first time, she approached without an audience watching. Her voice was softer when she spoke, stripped of performance. And she admitted that what he did on stage had unsettled her. He listened without interruption, eyes attentive but calm, as if he had expected nothing else. When she asked why he had never pursued singing professionally, he answered simply that life doesn't always move in straight lines, that sometimes talent survives quietly while circumstances decide everything else. There was no complaint in his words, no accusation, just truth stated plainly. She offered him an opportunity, a way forward, not as charity, but as acknowledgement. And he accepted it without urgency, understanding that doors opening late are still doors worth considering. Over the following days, the story traveled far beyond the venue, retold by strangers who felt something awaken inside them when they heard it. People argued about status and fairness, about how many voices are lost because no one expects them to matter. The singer read these reactions alone, sitting in her studio, surrounded by awards that suddenly felt heavier. She practiced differently now, listening more closely to her own sound, searching for sincerity rather than perfection. When they met again, it wasn't under stage lights, but in a quiet room where music echoed off bare walls. He sang without nerves this time, and she listened without judgment, recognizing that greatness isn't diminished by sharing space with another voice. He eventually stepped into a new path, one that balanced opportunity with humility, carrying his past with him instead of erasing it. She continued her journey too, changed in subtle but permanent ways, more aware of the invisible lines people draw between worth and position. For those who had witnessed that night, the memory endured not as gossip or spectacle, but as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments happen when expectations fall apart, and a voice rises from where no one thought to listen.